Welcome to Mother's Day 2021. Some mothers were and are awesome, some mothers not so awesome, but hey, riddle me this. Without your mom, where would you be now? Would you be now? All right, let's get her done. It is almost a cliche to read the epilogue to Proverbs on Mother's Day, but hey, if it is a cliche, it's a good one, so let's do it. We're going to read the epilogue, and then we're going to go back and pick a couple of verses and expand on them. Okay, let's go. Proverbs 31:10 and following. A wife of noble character, who can find? She's worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships, bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still dark. She provides food for her family and portions for her servant girls. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive, and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the reward she has earned, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. I'm going to read you a quote, and then tell you who said it. Here we go. A small child waits with impatience the arrival home of a parent. She wishes to relate some sandbox experience. She's excited to share the thrill that she has known that day. The time comes, the parent arrives. Beaten down by the stresses of the workplace, the parent often replies, "Not now, honey, I'm busy. Go, watch television." The most often spoken words in the American household today are the words, "Go watch television." If not now, when? Later, but later never comes for many, and the parent fails to communicate at the very earliest of ages. We give her designer clothes and computer toys, but we do not give her what she wants the most, which is our time. Now she's 15 and has a glassy look in her eye. "Honey, do we need to sit down and talk?" Too late. Love has passed by. The person who wrote those words was Robert Keeshan, better known to America as Captain Kangaroo. I think Keeshan was really onto something there. I recall when Sesame Street was the big thing in children's programming, Bob Keeshan was asked about it. After all, the boomer kids were raised on him. Now the boomers were raising their kids on Big Bird. Keeshan said all that was fine, the numbers, the letters, and all that, but there was a key thing being left out. Bob Keeshan said, "Teach a child he or she is loved, and the numbers and letters will take care of themselves." Bob Keeshan, Captain Kangaroo, was a wise man. So let us, on this Mother's Day in the year 2021, remember wise mothers. You know, mothers can be shrewd. Former President Jimmy Carter was giving a speech at Southern Methodist University, and he related an incident that occurred after he had left the White House. A woman reporter came to Plains, Georgia, to interview his mother, Lillian, in relation to an article about Mr. Carter and the family. His mother didn't really want to be interviewed, but was being gracious, so when the reporter knocked at her door, Mrs. Carter invited her in. The reporter asked some hard questions and actually was rather aggressive and rude. "I want to ask you a question," she said. "Your son ran for the presidency on the premise that he would always tell the truth. Has he ever lied?" Mrs. Carter said, "I think he's truthful. I think you can depend on his word." The reporter again asked if he had ever lied in his entire life. His mother said, "Well, I guess maybe he's told a little white lie." "Aha! See there," the reporter exclaimed. "He's lied. If he told a white lie, he has lied." The reporter was still not satisfied and asked, "What is a white lie?" And then Lillian Carter said, "It's like a moment ago when you knocked on the door and I went to the door and said I was glad to see you." Oh, yeah. On this Mother's Day, we remember several things. Number one, we remember the compassion of godly moms. Proverbs 31, let's pick back up 15, verses 15 and 20. And she rises while it is still night and gives food to her household and portions to her attendants. Verse 20, she extends her hand to the poor and she stretches out her hands to the needy. She takes care of her family. She takes care of her community. 3 things to remember. Godly moms, number 1, love Christ. There's the bottom line. Love my Jesus. Nothing you do makes sense without Jesus. When God comes to help his people, it was and is in the form of Jesus. It is Jesus that makes our existence possible. It is Jesus that will reunite moms and kids again if they're in the Lamb's Book of Life. Number 2, they love the church. Here is the vehicle for raising up your kids so that they will be in the Lamb's Book of Life. Here is the community in which your kids will seek and find the face of God himself. And moms, you got to make sure they're here. Why are most people in churches? Well, because somebody led them. And so often that somebody is mom. You know, when I was growing up, my mom certainly wasn't perfect, but I never saw my mom put a cigarette in her mouth. I never saw her put a beer can to her lips. And I was in high school before I ever heard her say a bad word, and then she was mocking something said by my dad, who, by the way, could turn a longshoreman's ears red with shame. How many moms can say that? How many moms have I seen trying to hold their babies without getting their cigarette ash on them? How many parents don't bother to clean up their language in front of the kids? How many kids have never seen the inside of a church because their parents are too hard-hearted and too steeped in their own selves and too stubborn to take their children to teach them about the God of the universe? Let me tell you something, parents. If you don't do it, statistically, it'll never get done. Moms and dads must be examples to the kids. Moms, love my Jesus and love his church. And then number 3, they labor for the cross. You don't have to be the world's greatest evangelist. You don't have to be a super mom. You don't have to be on half the committees in the church. You just need to be faithful in sharing your faith when the opportunity arises and live as a real life example of godly living for these little ones. We remember the compassion of godly moms. Number 2, we remember the character of godly moms. Let's pick back up verse 25. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she smiles at the future. In other words, she has principles that are honest. She has praise that is honorable. Let the humanist and the fatalist moan and groan about the future. The godly mom has the intestinal fortitude to deal with the problems of today. And she can laugh at the future because she knows that no matter what happens, there will be ultimate healing and there will be ultimate victory in Jesus. Yes, this is Mother's Day. And I want to express my appreciation for that time-honored institution, without the benefit of which we wouldn't even be here. Did you know that as ministers, we're often reminded not to get too sentimental about motherhood? In fact, sometimes we ministers are advised to downplay Mother's Day because, For some, motherhood is an accident and not always welcome. For some, biological motherhood isn't possible. For some, mothers weren't all that nice. For some, motherhood, under the very best circumstances, is still less than a bed of roses and hardly a primrose path. And for some, motherhood is a matter of loss and grief. So with all those situations, why bother with Mother's Day at all? Well, I'll tell you what I think. Because for all of its stumbling blocks, pitfalls, broken dreams, dirty diapers, soiled wallpaper, oh, you moms know what I'm talking about there, and spoiled plans, still, we are talking about a beautiful ideal, a natural part of God's creative plan to bring love and caring to light. Motherhood is a constant demand for the gift of love and caring. And so we remember the compassion of godly mothers. We remember the character of godly mothers. Thirdly, we remember the conviction of godly moms. Proverbs 31:26. She opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. You know, children are reminded more than once not to forsake the teaching of their mothers. Oscar Wilde wrote in The Importance of Being Earnest, a trivial comedy for serious people, he said, "All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That is his." All too often we see people carried away by this fad or that fad, by this new trend or that new trend. The godly mother is not one that is likely to be swept up into the latest theological fad or cultural trend. Why do you think that sound advice is so often credited with mom? For instance, when you say, "My mother told me there'd be days like this." Mothers are wise, although we often don't understand it. It's like the time a counselor was helping his kids put their stuff away in the first morning in summer camp. He's surprised to see one of the youngsters had an umbrella. The counselor asked, "Why did you bring an umbrella to camp?" The kid said, "Didn't you ever have a mother?" Yeah. So we remember the compassion of godly mothers. We remember the character of godly mothers. We remember the conviction of godly mothers. And fourthly, we remember the courage of godly moms. Verse 21, "She is not afraid of the snow, for all her household are clothed with scarlet." Hey, you know what? It takes nerve to be a mother today. Well, it always has. The godly mom has prepared, so when the winds of adversity blow, when the storms crash and rumble, when you're up against the wall, your shirt tail's on fire, and the bill collector's at the door, she can look at those days with confidence because her God is God, and he has come to help his people. Americans know that Abraham Lincoln led this nation through perhaps its time of greatest crisis. But who was it that made Abraham Lincoln the man that he was? Who was it that gave him the courage to lead us through that most horrible of times? Well, Lincoln himself gave the answer. He said it was his mother. Years ago, I watched this really bad movie, a silly movie. I can't even remember the name of it now to look up the poster. But anyway, some Europeans there fled the oncoming Japanese army in the early months of World War II, and in the Exodus, a couple got separated from their son, and they went on, but the son missed the boat and spent the rest of the war enduring the hardships of the Japanese occupation. The thing that really got me about this movie was not how the kid endured the terrible things going on, but that the parents left without their son. I commented, I told Carolyn, I cannot see you doing that, and she guaranteed that would never happen. She would not ever leave without any of our children, and I'll tell you what, I wouldn't have left either. I love to tell the story about the time our son Jordan was playing in the school band there in Veneta, Oklahoma, and it was the time of the annual Veneta Rodeo, and so suddenly, in the middle of all of that, the tornado sirens went off. Not that this is a rare occurrence, you understand. This was Oklahoma, all right? So anyway, Carolyn rushed out of the house in the midst of a very severe thunderstorm with a tornado close by and bearing down, jumped into the car, drove like a maniac through flooded streets, driving rain, lightning aplenty, and thunder, and with this tornado bearing down and the sirens going off, and she went to the rodeo grounds. They were all huddling under the bleachers there, and snagged up Jordan and brought him home. I'll tell you what, I pity the tornado that comes around this mama grizzly. Indeed. We remember the compassion of godly mothers. We remember the character of godly mothers. We remember the conviction of godly mothers, and remember the courage of godly mothers. And finally, we remember the commitment of godly moms. Closing out our text, verses 27 to 31. She watches over the activities of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her. Her husband also, he praises her, saying, "Many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her the product of her hands, and let her works praise her in the city gates." May I conclude with this parable for mothers. A young mother set her foot on the path of life. "Is the way long?" she asked, and her guide said, "Yes, and the way is hard, and you will be old before you reach the end of it, but the end will be better than the beginning." Then the night came, and storm, and the path was dark, and the children shook with fear and cold, and the mother drew them close, covered them with her mantle, and the children said, "O mother, we are not afraid, for you are near, and no harm can come." And the mother said, "This is better than the brightest of day, for I have taught my children courage." And the morning came, and there was a hill ahead, and the children climbed and grew weary, and the mother was weary, but at all times she said to the children, "A little patience, and we are there." So the children climbed, and when they reached the top, they said, "We could not have done it without you, mother." And the mother, when she lay down that night, looked up at the stars and said, "This is a better day than the last, for my children have learned fortitude in the face of difficulty. Yesterday I gave them courage, today I have given them strength." And the next day came strange clouds, which darkened the earth, clouds of war and hate and evil. And the children groped and stumbled, and the mother said, "Look up, lift your eyes to the light." And the children looked and saw above the clouds an everlasting glory, and it guided them beyond the darkness. And that night the mother said, "This is the best day of all, for I have shown my children God." And the days went on, and the months and the years, and the mother grew old, and she was small and bent, but her children were strong and tall, and walked with courage. And when the way was hard, they helped their mother, and when the way was rough, they lifted her, for she was light as a feather. And at last they came to a hill, and beyond the hill they could see a shining road and golden gates flung wide. And the mother said, "I have reached the end of my journey, and now I know that the end is better than the beginning, for my children can walk alone, and their children after them." And the children said, "You will always walk with us, mother, even when you have gone through the gates." And they stood and watched her as she went on alone, and the gates closed after her. And they said, "We cannot see her, but she is with us. A mother like ours is more than a memory. She is a living presence." Well, Mother's Day 2021, our time is at hand, and I'll be seeing you around.